Hello, you're watching Artist Rap, conversations with musicians, artists, and creative people. We will share stories, concepts, life, and music. We hope these unique insights and topics will enrich your day. I'm your host, Ali Jackson.
It's so funky.
Hello, Ali Jackson here. I'm sitting with today one of the foremost voices on his instrument, the trombone, uh, keeper of the tradition and the now, setting the stage for the future with his sound, his concepts, his perennial innovation on the instrument, and his arranging, along with his singing. I'm speaking of the one and only Vincent Gardner. Welcome, Mr. Gardner.
Man, thank you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you for having me. And I'm gonna have to go to the dictionary and look up some of what you just said about me. But I'm gonna hope that it's all good.
Mr. Gardner, you are how can I say, you've been an inspiration for me in my development. I can say that for sure. It's coming up, hearing about you. They said, man, there's this kid down in FAMU that's playing all kind of trombone. You need, and I was like, well, I was the only person I knew that was really great playing trombone at FAMU was, of course, the one and only Wycliffe Gordon. And then they was like,
Right.
it's not him. It's another boy. His name's Vince. And they weren't lying.
Oh, man.
You have so many things we could talk about. So I'm gonna just get into just maybe for our listeners or viewers, because this dialogue is really just between artists, you know, people who've spent their life playing or working on their art, in making a living with their art, or at least trying to make a living with their art. Um, and a lot of us come from musical families, because we grew up in the music. You know, we started as kids, and I know that's true for you. So I would like for our listeners to, you could just give a brief summary or background of what it was like, growing up, and how you got into music.
Well, uh, well, first I was both of my parents are music educators, and both are professional musicians. So I was always around the music in both settings, an academic setting and also in a performance setting. My father is a trumpet player and an educator. My mother is a classically trained pianist and choir director, and also an educator. And so I was always at some university's concert, choir concert, or jazz band concert, or some kind of university concert growing up. Before I was born, they taught in public schools in Chicago. So my brothers and sisters were always at some high school choral concert, or some high school band concert, or something. So it just our whole family was always around that. And so when I came along, I was also the same thing, always around some type of environment where there were people, young people, older than me, but studying, my parents teaching them, and then I was seeing the output going to those concerts. So I was just always around that environment. And then of course my father being a trumpet player and a jazz player, he was playing gigs too. And then my brother was a trumpet player. Derek, of course, is a trumpet player too. And I used to watch him playing gigs. He's 7 years older than me. So before I was playing, I used to see him playing gigs in Virginia, where I grew up. And so I was just always in that environment. It was just always something that had to be studious, but always had to be something centered around something performance based. You're gonna at some point you're gonna get in front of people and do something. And so there's some preparation that goes into that. So you expected to prepare for that. When I started playing piano um, at 6 years old, and I, had to have recitals and things like that. My mother she wasn't my piano teacher. My mother wasn't my piano teacher, but she was always on me. Say, look, you got this recital coming up. You got to get ready for it. And so things like that will always happen. So I was just always kind of around in that environment, and that shaped me a lot, in the way I think about things.
That's awesome. So tell me one of your first performances, or um, something that made you go like, man, I kind of want to do this. Like I want to be a musician.
Well, the first Well, I started playing jazz music at about when I was about 16. You know, I was always in band, but I wasn't playing jazz music necessarily. I didn't play any jazz music all up until I was about the 10th grade. 10th grade is when I got into the Hampton All City Jazz Band, and the director there was a guy named Al Morris, and he's a trombone player. He's the one that introduced me to J.J. Johnson and kind of got me on the path. And so, you know, I had a gig. You know, my mother was the chairman of the music department, chairperson of the music department at Hampton University. And so I was very connected with all of the faculty there. And the guy who taught my brother was a trumpet player, the jazz band director there named Bob Ransom. And he used to do little gigs around Hampton or in the area. And so when I started finally coming up and trying to learn how to play a couple of good notes, he asked me to play this gig with him at the YMCA in Hampton. And it's this outdoor thing around, it was hot, so it was about around August, you know, in a big kind of pavilion outside. So I played, and we were playing St. Thomas, and I couldn't really play at all. You know, I knew I couldn't play, and I knew it, but I didn't really know how bad I couldn't play. So you know, I was playing, and man, I know what I was playing had nothing to do with what the changes of St. Thomas were necessarily, but it was in some kind of groove, and it felt good to me. So I just kept doing it. And so when I kept doing it, and I'm sure I played a little bit too long because I heard the crowd start to hiss a little bit, and it wasn't that many of them there. You know, it's a jazz gig in Virginia in the 1980s, so it ain't like there was thousands of people there. But I could, it was enough 40 people that I could hear people hissing, and you know, man, get off the stage kind of thing. And finally, guy comes behind me, the other trumpet player who was on the band comes behind me and says, "Come on, you know, I don't know where I was in the form, I don't know where I was in the changes. It was just the time to stop." And so he just came in, look, come on back. But I knew that even in all of that dysfunction of me playing and the dysfunction that I caused on the bandstand, that the feeling of what that was being around everybody and making music with them, that it was something I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to get better at doing it. And I knew, you know, I kind of knew at that moment I wasn't good at doing it, but I knew I wanted to get better at doing it. But I love the camaraderie, and I love the fact that, you know, I thought about it later. The fact that this cat would come up, you know, and just say, "Look, man, all right, that's enough." He wasn't messed up about it or anything like that. It was just, you know, okay, you've been up there long enough. You really ain't playing nothing anyway, but you've been up there long enough. Come on, son. You know. So I enjoyed that environment. And so that one that at that end the instruction I got from that director I was telling you about kind of made me want to explore it further. And that was kind of the first, I guess, thing that lit the fire in me to try to want to play jazz music and do that for a living.
Mm, wow. And so being next after being sequestered off of the off the bandstand, how did you get serious on like learning language and vocabulary and like just having a discipline? Because I feel like that's really important for younger musicians. Anyways, like you know, what material did you study or really check out or albums? Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that.
Well, it came to the point where I mean I got some instruction, of course, from the person I was telling you about, Al Moore, that band director of the Hampton All City Jazz Band. He steered me in the right direction to some J.J. Johnson recordings. He was the one that first kind of laid out what it was that needed to be done. Okay, you need to check these records out. You need to transcribe. It was like I first time I heard the word transcribe was from him. You know, you need to transcribe this solo. I'm like, what is that? Learn the solo. But when you learn it, you got to learn it exactly like JJ. You got to get every little bit of what he's doing. So, you know, so of course, me in like 10th grade, I went and found the Jamie Abersol J.J. Johnson transcription book and said, okay, well, hell, it's all. I've been trained to play with class. And that means I'm being successful at my job as a musician. Just play what's in front of me. So I'm listening to these solos that the guy is telling me to learn, and I'm saying, oh, all the notes are right here. Let me go learn it, transcribe it. What's all of that? I can just play it out of here. So I play it for him. He said, well, that's the notes, man, but that's not the solo. That don't sound like what JJ is doing. Do you hear the way the vibrato? Do you hear the soul in what he's playing, how he's ending his notes? Do you see any of that written down on the paper? He said, that's not what you did, is you read something. You read some notes. You've been doing that ever since I've known you. I want you to learn how to play like JJ. You know, get into the sound of this man. That's what he was telling me. So then I closed the book and started to get down to try to really learn, you know, how JJ got, what kind of sound he got. I started to read up whatever you could. This is before the internet and all of that. So, you know, I tried to read up on whatever I could, ask my father or ask anybody that may have known something about JJ or whoever, you know. And that's when I kind of got into more of the details of finer details of who he was and of how to play jazz music. You know, learning how to deal with time on this instrument. The trombone's a very awkward instrument. It just does not foster good timekeeping by itself. So just how to deal with time on this instrument that has this moving part that if there's a slight variation, a warp in the metal that can affect the time that you play from one note to the next. Like how do you get around that with your articulation and how in your air and how do you do all of that? So I started to get more in depth into that. And that's what really, you know, in checking out JJ and some other people, I started to realize that, man, you got to actually study every detail of your performance. You have to understand how to create good air as a brass musician, how to articulate for any situation. So a certain phrase going like you like bird and those kind of things takes a different articulation than just going. It's a different articulation. So you got to learn both of those settings and other articulations. So you have to break down each one of them and learn them all isolated techniques and then put them together for your overall technique. So all of that stuff kind of came together based off of me starting with JJ and then thinking that reading it was out of a book was recreating it when it wasn't. And so, and Al Morris was really blunt with me, telling me that now you got to get to what it is, and breaking that down led me to different techniques and ways to approach the instrument, and then I found out that's what other people did too. You know, that's what Sonny Stitt did with Bird. You know, that's what Coltrane did with Bird. Like that's what all the baddest cats did. They figured out how to imitate their idols on their instrument as much as they could, and they learned how to be themselves in the process.
Now, is that a natural ability for you? A natural. Let me rephrase that. Emulation, is that natural for you? Like to emulate things? Or were you like that with people? Could you like imitate, like or imitate people? Or you know how some people are really great imitators? They can imitate people's body language or style or their diction, or you know, was that easy for you?
It was. I used to do that with like James Evans on Good Times. I used to, you know, I remember when I was, you know, too young to be acting like James Evans. I would say who was it? There was a colleague of my mother's that came over to the house one time, and she was talking about something that she wanted to do, and like a goal, like something she wanted to achieve or something she wanted to do, right? You know, I like to do this in 5 years or something. They were just talking. You know, I'm a little kid. I'm like 8, man, sitting around there, shouldn't have had my nose in the business, right? And I said something like, well, get off your butt and do it. Like James Evans would say, well, just get off your butt and do it. Something like he would talk to Bookman on Good Times, you know, be shouting at him and say, get off your butt and do it and go. I said that to her. And my mother gave me this look. Boy, like, man, I must have said that good. She gave me a look. Everybody, I mean, all the adults in the room looked at me, of course, but my mother really gave me a look. So I must have said that good. I was thinking about James Evans. I always like to imitate people. I did that. I did do that a lot as a kid.
And see that says a lot about your own, how can I say, your ability to tell stories. It's like telling a story is also about hearing the story and retelling it. Like in the, you know, in a
Right.
lot of very traditional folklore settings, that's how, like, you know, that's how, you know, you have mythology.
Right.
Because it all starts from somebody told a story, and then the next person tells it, and they embellish it, and they tell it in their way a little bit, and it goes on and on. But hopefully, at the
Right.
crux of it is the still, you know, the meaning of the story never changes. However, it does get embellished. Uh,
Right.
you know, I mean, a lot of times for musicians, I mean, that's ultimately what we do. When you look at a sheet of music, you know, how you play it is left up to interpretation. Now the notes are there, but each person that plays it is going to play it a little bit different.
That's
Um,
right.
and you know, you can't play it like the original person played it anyway. However, what you're talking about, your ability to emulate and learn the ways or the details of how someone plays, it became, it's obviously very natural for you, and you applied it in your development, and how you, how can I say, how you were able to express yourself in a musical context.
Right. Right. And I think it's important to note that in jazz music, that the goal of it, it's not like a Las Vegas performer who's going to imitate Sinatra. Like becoming Sinatra is the goal for them. In jazz music, the goal is to become yourself based off of the things you learn by imitating someone else. And so I always had to keep that as the goal. And I don't know when I kind of realized it, but as I used to really be able to imitate JJ well. I probably still can if I really shared it on it a little bit. But I used to really, in college when I was at FAMU and all that, I could really play a JJ Johnson solo and be very much like him. And at some point, I broke from that, realizing that, well, the goal of it is to find myself within trying to do this, because I heard somebody else talk about imitating someone and say, well, he's got that job. He's himself already. You can't be him. But the things you learn on the way to trying to be like him are the things that you can develop into yourself. And so that's the goal of it. So it's not like imitation is not the goal. Imitation is a step, is a learning step. But the goal is to find those things that are yourself and then to develop those things into your own sound.
What did Train say? Acknowledgement.
That's it.
Pursuance.
Pursuance, acknowledgement, resolution.
You dig?
That's it. There it is.
And pray that you get it.
And prayer, right. And pray.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. But I mean, I'm discovering a lot of things about, we've known each other for, I'm not even gonna say how many.
Man, long, yeah. It's like it hadn't been long enough.
Okay. For your concept, or the way that you play, I mean, it's extremely unique. And I want to add the question before we get off of it, because we're kind of on the topic. I want to talk to you about your ability. You sing as well. You sing fabulously. I mean, you could just be a singer and put that trombone down. We could dress you up,
Right. I can get a gig in Vegas.
Yeah, with some blue hair. But I want to talk about a little bit about singing and your vocal type of style of playing, because when you play, it sounds like a voice. When you play the trombone, so it sounds like a voice, and a lot of times, even with all the vocabulary and knowledge and facility you have on the instrument, it sounds very natural and organic. And how did you develop that? And do you think about it? And how do you think about it?
Well, I mean, I was always a singer. I was always in choir because of my mother. I used choir at our church for years, since I was 9 years old or something. So that was always a part of my concept. And when I discovered, and these correlations are not made, I think, early enough. I was way too old when I made this correlation. I wish somebody had told me this when I was 13 or 12 or something. The trombone is a voice. That the instrument has qualities like the voice, can do natural glissandi. It's in the range of the male tenor voice. It's got a lot of things that other instruments don't have, other wind instruments don't have, that are in similar to the voice, the way that the voice operates. And so it should always be played that way, because it's naturally, those qualities are naturally inherent in the trombone. Now, of course, there are other people that play other instruments the same way. Eddie Harris is a guy, like, I just listened to some Eddie Harris the other day, man. He does the same kinds of things that people who play from a vocal perspective do. He does that on tenor saxophone the same way. So it can be done on other instruments, but it's natural to the trombone. I was in my 20s before I really kind of dealt with that and started to try to make that a part of my conception. But once I realized it, it was like I was playing another instrument. Because, man, it was just like everything that you sing, you can play. And you should sing everything you play. You should play everything that you sing. It's just the same thing to me. So I think of the phrasing of it. The same way that I think of a vocalist phrasing a lot of times. And I used to even practice, man. When I was really working on a lot of standards, I used to get the Ella Fitzgerald songbooks, and I would transcribe her vocal choruses with her phrasing. just sing along with her phrasing, put the breaks, put the vibrato, put all the things where she would breathe as a vocalist, and work on. And that became a kind of a model for some of the ways that I phrased. So I can just remember, like, once I realized it, I started to find ways to develop it. And then of course, and then when I met people like, when I really met people like Wycliffe and other people who just had like just ridiculous amounts of soul in the way that they played, and realizing that soulful perspective was also natural to the trombone. Yeah, man, I just tried to combine all of that together and to create my own way of playing.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, if I had to ask you, what is your style of playing, or your basic concept of playing? Like, to sum it up, like a summary. If somebody was like, well, what's Vincent Gardner's style of playing? Or what are the ingredients?
It's like a basis of J.J. Johnson combined with phrasing from like the church and Donny Hathaway and people like that.
It's way more than that.
Think, the phrasing, like I try to incorporate. My technical base is very much like JJ plays, and that is the thing in itself. That the way that his technical base was different than any other trombonist that came before him, and was the basis for almost everyone that came after him, at least those on the East Coast. And so it comes out of that style technically, but the actual phrasing, the nuances that I play with, are based on much more vocal techniques, church-inspired things, soul singer-inspired things. I just naturally hear that way. Once I became aware of it and the similarity to the horn, I naturally started doing that and developing. So it has a lot of that in it. But I mean, I'm a jazz musician, so I believe in the things that jazz musicians believe in, playing changes and jazz language and all of that. But I like to incorporate all of those soulful aspects into it that come from some of those other traditions outside of jazz or related to jazz music.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah, just because it's interesting to know how you think about it. Because when you listen to records, as we both do, that's basically what we do. Someone said, a wise man once said, God created people with 2 ears and 1 mouth to listen twice as much as you speak.
Right.
So we've listened to a lot of music, I'm sure, and a lot of the same music. And what happens is you often don't get the opportunity to hear from someone how they actually think about it and their process about how they approach music, and like where it comes from a technical standpoint. And this is a conversation maybe had many times by our ancestors and generations before us. However, we live in a society today where we have so much content, but none of it's really substantive.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, that clears up a lot for me, and I'm sure there are more questions that could spin out of that. I want to ask you, what was your favorite band that you worked in as a a younger musician, as you got into the professional ranks, and what had the most impact on you? What band in your earlier part of your career?
I was playing with Frank Foster. Frank Foster's Loud Minority. That was the name of the big band, the Loud Minority Big Band. And Foster, when I was in high school, Foster was directing the Count Basie Orchestra. My brother Derek was a part of that trumpet section in that band, so I grew up listening to them, and that was my first, introduction to Foster. Was when I was about ninth grade, 10th grade, and when Foss left the Basie band, he had the Loud Minority together at different points in his career, but he wanted to actually make it a working ensemble. And he was leaving the Basie band, and that was one of his goals, is to get his Loud Minority big band together. And he told me when I was in college that he wanted me. I told him I was going to move to New York when I finished school. He said, "Man, when you come to New York, if I want you for my band." And so for me, man, You know, I was like, I'm going to play with Frank Foster. That's why I'm coming to New York to go and play with Frank Foster. And so when I started playing with him and we get in those rehearsals with him, like I realized the depth that this cat had, man. Foss would just he could reference music from any era at any time. You try to pull out something, man, like Foss is known for all the stuff he played, he played with Elvin and the trio. He played all kind of stuff that's just killing it. We wrote wrote Shiny Stockings, wrote freer stuff with Elvin, played freer stuff with Elvin. But he also had, man, arrangements and was playing like stuff like Darktown Strutter's Ball and stuff like that, man, with his band, and made a killing arrangement of it. And so, man, he just had music from every era of jazz music that you can think of, man, from some of the earliest to some of the most, kind of postmodern, what they were, freer things they were doing in the 60s and early 70s and all of that. He had all of that at his disposal and was a master of all of it and could pull any of it out at any time. So when I got into his band, man, and started to Anchor just, man, what he would write was like, I'm in the middle of these arrangements, like, good God, man, how does he hear this kind of stuff doing this? And so, man, when I got in his band, it was very influential on me as a writer, playing trombone, sitting in his band, because the trombone has an interesting perspective orchestrationally, because we're in the middle of everything. We can hear everything above us and below us, and we're playing in conjunction with both things at all times. What we're playing, lead trombone is usually doubling the lead trumpet an octave down, something like that, something close to it at some point in some line. The trombone section will be used to fill out a saxophone voicing, or to add to it, double some notes, but maybe add a colored note somewhere in there too that will rub with somebody in the saxophone section at some point. And then all kind, man, all kind of different collaboration.
Come on, this is great.
But all kind of combinations of different things, cross voicing things, and all of that. I'm sitting in the trombone section before I've written anything, like, in my early 20s in Foster's band, listening to this master doing all of this at different times. Like, man, hold on, I'm with them. I'm with this. I'm with him. But how does this fit with that? I'm in the middle, and from the middle, it's a great perspective to learn from. And so I use that, man. All of those rehearsals I was in with him, and I was just asking him a million questions. Man, why did you put me here? Why did you put me with? Why am I with them? When we get to this, now this is a big chord. Why am I here? And I heard I wasn't playing lead at that point either. Why is this third part here and you have him there instead of this? When I started to kind of arrange myself and say, why you do this instead of that? At first it was just why, then it's not why instead. And so, man, Foss, man, when I got just around all of that depth, I learned not only a lot about just, the basics, arranging and all of that, but I learned a lot about the scene too, that this genius could not have world tours set up for the big band 300 dates a year, writing the most music kind of any cat that's out here, having Shiny Stockings, have written all of this. It's this cat who is an absolute genius and one of the coolest people that you could ever be with, and one of the greatest saxophonists that was alive at the time. Could that have that substance and not be championed by the entire music world? That showed me a lot when I was in my 20s about where we were out here. Stuff we talk about all the time. Once I actually experienced it, working with jazz at Lincoln Center and all of that and that kind of thing, seeing just what the scene was really like, But man, it was then that I realized, man, it's really challenging out here for people of substance when you see pop stars that are being elevated, and a genius like this who can get maybe 7, 8 big band gigs a year, writing all this great music and being able to play it all on the highest level. Like, it showed me a lot. So I mean, but that also reaffirmed the fact that we should still do it. That if he can do it after all he's been through, this is 1997, and he's been in music since the 40s, and he's got this much energy to do it at 6 years old, to come out of the Basie band, form his own new big band with a bunch of young knuckleheads like me and Kenyatta Beasley and Keith Loftus and Bruce Williams and all that. And you, right? And you. Yeah. And everybody else who came through that band, mixed with some old cats, and try to train us writing all this bad music and try to scrounge around for big band gigs in the era where nobody wanted to hire big bands. If he could do it, I in my 20s, man, didn't have anything to complain about. Let's just go do it. You know, so man, I learned a lot about music, about the industry, about the drive you have to have from him, and just about being cool through all of it. He was always cool, but he was direct. I should say this about Foss. Foss would tell me I was sad all the time, but he would tell me exactly why. When you got on this half the minutes chord, you played this. You didn't play that. You should have played this. If you had played this, you know, this would have worked a lot better. I remember this is like, you know, after you do a rehearsal and then you're on a break, it's like 20 minutes or 10 minutes since you played that solo. Then you go up to him, he said, say, man, when you play on that half the minutes chord, this is 10 minutes ago, and we've already heard a bunch of music since then. He will remember what you messed up on 10 or 15 minutes ago on one chorus of a solo. And he was always real direct. I mean, I love that about him.
Well, he was the master of not being only direct, but also super cool about it. So he wasn't abrasive. It was always helpful. And if he said you were doing something wrong, he always had a correction. And I live by that today. I will never call something out unless you have a solution for the problem.
That's right. That's exactly it.
He was truly a master of that. I have to add that, because he would tell you, he would give you the options of how to fix whatever the problem was.
You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. And you know, like I know, you knew cats that weren't like that. That would just tell you, oh no, you sad. No, you messing up, man. You sad. Well, hold on. Why am I sad?
But that was a part of getting your stripes too. So Foss was kind of an innovator in that concept, because most people from his generation, they wouldn't give you a solution or direct you.
Right.
They would just tell you, and it was on you to figure out why you're sad.
Right. Right. That's why I love that about Foss too. But that shaped a lot of the way that I am as a teacher. Same thing with you as an educator. That completely shaped that perspective. Completely shaped how I teach, because I do the same thing. I call it out, but this is what you have to do.
Right. Definitely. And you never felt bad. You always felt better leaving one of his rehearsals or his class. You felt uplifted and motivated, like, oh man. Then you go like, wow. Well, it would always, you could say this. You couldn't say you weren't inspired.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, you had that. Plus, you had to acknowledge it, man. Like, I was sad. I did do that.
Right.
He was right. You couldn't see. It's not like he was lying to you. He was accurately and honestly assessing what you actually played, and then telling you how to get better at it.
Right.
So I mean, you know, you couldn't be mad at it. How can you be mad at that?
You can't be mad. You can only be grateful.
Yeah, you know, that's exactly it.
Well, speak a little bit, since you mentioned uh, the Supreme Master Frank Foster. Let's talk a little bit about how you developed your arranging style. I mean, in my world, you're one of the world's most amazing and unique arrangers. Period. Doesn't matter what you do, because uh, it's just unique to you. So, for those who truly don't know what arranging is, I'm gonna just break it down for our listeners who are not music people. So, an arranger is someone who takes a song that already exists. It could be Mary Had a Little Lamb. It could be to the left, to the left. Beyond, whatever you want. An arranger takes that song and puts it into a format where other musicians can play it. So it could be for a string quartet, it could be for a big band, it could be for a trio, it could be for voice and piano, it could be for whatever. But they take the song and they arrange it in a way for people to play in a different setting, and you can do lots of different things to the arrangement. You can slow it down, you can speed it up, you could change the key of the arrangement, you could add things to it, embellish it in lots of different ways, and it's a complete art in itself. Sometimes a arranger could take the most simple song and turn it into something that you couldn't even imagine. So Vincent Gardner, you are a genius at doing this, straight up. I mean, there are lots of great arrangers, but very few that have such a unique voice and an imagination. So, can you take us into your arranging brain?
Yeah, well, man, look, I can't say a word until I say that for everyone out there. Ollie Jackson is one of the most inventive and amazing arrangers also. Now, I know you're asking me a question, but I got to just say it. Don't think that for a second. This cat writes some of the baddest arrangements. And, you know, especially, I know people probably stigmatize drummers. Oh, man, drummers can't write arrange for other things. And look, Ollie Jackson can write, and he writes some of the baddest and most original arrangements you'll ever hear. And likes to put that percussion perspective on it. There's always a drummer's perspective on the arrangement. That you know, something nobody but a drummer would think of. There's always something in there that has to do with that, but also has everything that anybody else would think of too.
Oh man,
That's Ollie Jackson, boy. But
I'm honored, but I'm well. I'll say this: what he said, he's inspired my arranging, and a lot of the members of the Jazz and Lincoln Center Orchestra, their concepts and their personalities, a lot of them come out through their arrangements, and so I'm just a vessel from all of that information and creativity and inventiveness that was in that ensemble and those people around it. So Vincent, out of all of those people, not only are his arrangements so unique, and sometimes they're extremely challenging, let's say from a technical perspective, and what I mean by that, they're hard to play on your instrument. However, they make complete sense. So sometimes things that look crazy when there's you could sing them. Winter Marsalis would always say, he was like, he'd look at his page and be like, man, I don't know how to play this. He said, can you sing it for me? And then Vincent will just sing it and be like, oh, okay. And that's true. I've had some of the most challenging drum parts that I've ever played, and that's tens of thousands. Vince Vincent wrote me a couple that stumped me, and I would have to be like, bro, well, like, what is this? When he explained the concept of it, then I was like, oh, because a lot of times it's conceptual, and sometimes nomenclature is not, that's like how something is written or formatted, uh, as opposed to what it sounds like.
right, right,
Um,
right,
yeah, so for us, that's a whole nother challenge of getting things that are very vocal and natural sounding or organic to be written in a Western kind of concept, like like note
right,
notation. So
right.
you're one of the masters at that both ways because you figure out how to notate things that generally aren't easily writable, and you write them and you make them sound amazing. I mean, there's so many arrangements I love. One of my favorites is Frosty the Snowman, uh, Rubber Ducky. These are classics. I mean, I mean, we got to get them posted too. So hopefully there'll be a link where if you want to hear these or actually buy the arrangements, you could probably go directly to Vincent. But truly inventive and amazing where you go like, that's Frosty the Snowman, and then you go like, you hear it in there, you go like, man, this is like some whole other, it's like you went the fourth dimension. And it's genius. I don't even know, like we would all, I can say this, we would all sit around and go like, man, how does he come up with this stuff? I mean, you talking about grown men that are very accomplished lifelong musicians, and we all be looking around at each other going like, man, how does he even hear this stuff? So please tell us now. Now you're on the spot, Vincent Gardner. How do you hear this stuff?
Well, I mean, I think my first rule is to just write what you hear. Just like my rule is to play what you hear, and all else be damned. That's pretty much what guides it, whatever I decide to write. I can remember a lot of times that, late at night, I'm thinking to myself, should I write this? I think that once. Should I write this? I mean, damn, just go ahead and write it. Just write it, man. Just develop this idea. That's the first thing that you heard. That's what you're hearing. Just write it out. We'll work it out. We'll figure out how to play it.
I would, do you have a chart that we could use or as an example? So at some point I could, we can use it or play it, but just talk us through one of the charts that come to mind that you had a really strong concept about and like how you put it together.
Okay. Well, I was trying to remember Frosty the Snowman, so I could talk about that one. I think I can talk about Rubber Ducky. I think a little clearer. I think they follow a little bit of the same format. There's something similar about the way I phrase the melody. First of all, I mean, when you're playing with the great Ali Jackson, you know, when you're playing with a band, you have the luxury of playing with with cats on the regularly, and you learn what they can do. You realize one of the greatest things that Ali does is that he will groove you into bad health. So so you have to use the strengths of people when you write things. So let Ali groove is always one of my first rules when I'm writing an arrangement. Ali's gonna play it. Allow him to groove. So try to even if I can't write down what the groove could be, once I sing it to him, he's gonna figure out how to groove it. And it might not be the way that I notated it, but what comes out will be exactly what I meant to write. Ali can figure out exactly what I was trying to do. So, you know, because sometimes it's impossible to notate in some instances. Sometimes, like you're saying, conceptually, you just have to be within the realm of a certain feeling, and then you improvise the groove within that. And so I like to sometimes write things that are a little more that are a little more open in the meaning of the notation, but direct in the concept and allow you to have some freedom to figure out what it should be. Of course, you know, with any big band, you have certain things that you have responsibilities to play, hits and setups and all that kind of stuff. But within that, even there's always freedom to groove and to do other things that are not written. So for me, I remember with Rubber Ducky, first of all, I was thinking about the Nutcracker Suite and Duke's um which movement is it? Is that Sugar Rum Cherry? I think it is.
Don't. Ah, tickle, tickle, don't. Ah, tickle, tickle.
I think that's what I'm throwing.
Jody, dee 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 dee, do be do be do.
So later on in that, when the pep section comes in, the pep section is playing behind the tenor solo. Wah 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 wah. That one, that little thing.
Yeah.
So there's that behind the tenor solo, and then there's another Nutcrackers movement where the pep section is used really differently. And those are two of the recordings out. The two movements of the Nutcracker Suite I was thinking about, and I said, man, I wanna explore this pep section, but you know, when you know the cat you're playing with, if I get print up with all of that soul at the top of the pep section, like I believe, well, I believe this is a fact. Soul cuts through the world. Period. Soul, it doesn't matter what it is and what incarnation, whether it's food, it's music, it's a person and their vibe, a car, or whatever it might be, a bike that just somebody did the right thing to and ride down the street, it catches your attention. You know, somebody like spray painted their bike the right way and it got some tennis balls in it, there's all of that, the flappers and all that stuff, man. But it looked hip. When they ride, you're like, dang, man, that hooked that bike up, man. Whatever it might be, a car that's hooked up right, any kind of soul, no matter what it is. And it's all soul is not black people's soul. It's any soul. Like any kind of soul cuts through all of this kind of fabric of the mundaneness of the world. So I believe in exploiting that at any point. So when I get a chance in orchestration to exploit it, I said, man, Marcus Printup, I got to get his sound playing the top of this Rubber Ducky pep section. But I noticed that the pep sections, when I listened to Duke play it, it didn't seem like in the three voices that Duke would have, a lot of times the melody note didn't cut through enough. So I doubled it. I made it a four-person pep section, put me at the octave on the bottom, and I voiced it in a way I think that's kind of open, more open than the kind of triadic church.
Come on, Vincent.
So you good?
Oh wait, yeah, I lost you for a second. Wait, go back. I lost you at
Go back.
go back to explaining. I lost you for a second about the four voicings. You were octave below than the.
Right. So I put an octave. I put myself at an octave below Printup. I spread the voicing out a little bit, but I put some little rubs in there, a little scritchum in there. But to just to give it a little soul and then I also slowed it down in the way that like like they would play melodies in the 70s in halftime. So instead of rubber ducky, you're the one. I put it on like halftime. Do, 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 lead up, yap, shubo do up, we up. So I spaced it out double time, and I used the pep section to deliver it with Marcus Printup at the top of it with all that soul. And all of us are playing, trying to get his vibrato, his soul in 4 parts to make it cut through, because I realized that no matter what you put around it, that's going to cut through. And even though on the paper it's not going to look like it should, it seems like I should. If you look at it on the paper, it seems like you got too much around it. But I believe again that the soul will always cut through. So I wrote it anyway, because I knew that we would find all the people that are not in the pep section playing the melody would find their balance, because they're such great musicians, to allow that to cut through. And then the other things that I use a lot of unisons based off of Duke Ellington's rule from some of those Nutcracker suites. A lot of unisons in the interjection. So if I have say I have the rest of the ensemble that's not the pep section playing part of the melody within the phrase. So let's say they go, if I have them going, and then I have the pep section answer, da. Pick up the melody, but pick it up with a lot of feeling and using wah-wahs to make it pop out after hearing saxophones playing something in unison on octaves. It's going to pop out. Da. And so then I have a conversation going between the saxophones and octaves playing the melody, and then the pep section playing with a lot of feeling. So I knew that was going to cut as long as I had Printup playing the top of it. And so that was kind of the guiding light behind it, the principle behind it, man. Put the melody in halftime, so it has a lot of space in between all of the phrasing of the melody. Put a lot of interjections in unisons and in octaves in between it, and have them converse with each other while it's going on. But at all costs, have Printup playing that melody with a lot of feeling, a lot of soul, playing Rubber Ducky. Because Rubber Ducky is such a silly song, this different perspective on it. If you got the right person playing it, it's going to make it feel completely different. And that was kind of what I was thinking of. And the whole time I was doing it, I was like, damn, man, is this going to work? Like, are they going to be able to hear the melody? And a lot of times, even inside the ensemble, you can't hear the melody. But I know it's coming out front because of the way it's voiced. I know that if we had that octave double, that's going to make it cut. And if you have the right feeling behind the octave double, it's definitely going to cut.
That's brilliant.
And then, of course, Ali Jackson, just let him get back there. Boom, boom. Let him just improvise all over that. Just let him, just tell him what the basic groove is, and don't tell him anything else. That's my vibe with Ali. Tell him what the basic groove is and don't say anything else, because he's going to come up with something a lot better than your words would dictate.
I don't know about that.
That's my vibe, man.
Well, I will say, just you explaining your concept behind where you put the melody, how you slow the tune down, how you orchestrate it using unison with the saxophones, like call and response between section and section, and having a pep section in the center of the tune of the melody, and the rhythm section just grooving. Right. And then you could go into like what's the solo section, like how did you devise or juxtapose the solos of the tune?
The solo section went into 4/4 swing, just basically because we needed to just come back to some grits and gravy after all of that. So I wanted to just go right, instead of keeping that groove for the solos, I wanted to just get right into the Tang Take It Ain't Some Spangalang.
And what about the tempo of that Spangalang?
The tempo of that is the regular tempo of the tune. If I remember right, it's double time. No, it's double time.
Oh yeah, or it's even, isn't it, more than double time or triple time? I think I thought it was like we played like really fast. It's like a really long form. Isn't that right? Right.
I wrote this little setup to set it up. Pivot up. Then I use this Count Basie thing. This kind of 3/4 feel. Ba-ba-da. I think I did that. Yep, and that set up the double time. So I transitioned from the 6 into that using that little section, and then went into that 3/4 3/4 to get into the 4.
Brilliant, man. It's crazy. Like, who thinks of this stuff? Who comes
But then again, man, also, man, I'm a real big proponent of you gotta, as you know, man, you're a very scholarly cat, man. You know a lot about music and a lot about life and other things too. But you gotta use what has been given to us from before. I'm talking about Duke and the Nutcracker. I'm talking about Basie, something I can't remember what that record came from. The little thing that I was talking about to get to the double time swing. And I didn't invite it. I didn't use it verbatim. I just used the concept of it to write something within the concept that would serve the function of getting me from 6 to the double time 4. But it was just the idea of using what the masters have done before us in your with your own way of doing something. And that's what I did. So that's what I think. So you got to, first of all, you got to know and study everything that's been done, things that haven't been done before, because that's the substance of what's going to allow you to create your own new take on something.
Brilliant. Wow. That's awesome. I mean, some of these terms, I'm sure some of our viewers might not know. They might have questions or whatever, but just the openness and using things that have already worked and putting them in a new context, or using them in your own way. And I think that's what you're saying. So a lot of people, they refer to some musicians as, oh, well, you're a purist. I don't say anyone. I don't think there's a such thing as that. It's like humanity was built on modularly. One, people just didn't walk up one day and start building skyscrapers.
Right.
They started with
right.
or an igloo. Shelter evolved, but it was modular. And as people develop, and there's new developments or making things, how can I say, more efficient or more effective, or more environmentally friendly. So the same with music, I say definitely applies. It's, a lot of times, why try to reinvent something that already exists, that works? Right. It's like a car. We haven't invented anything new from a car.
Man, you
Cars
did.
have 4 wheels on it.
Steering wheel, seats. Something to play some music.
Right. It's still right. Nothing has changed. Now it could, and I'm open to it. However, like, things do evolve. Yeah. However, no one's evolved, a substitute for hugging somebody or showing love.
Man, look at the devices that we're talking on right now. I know you remember, we like the same age, man. Do you remember like the Radio Shack TR-80?
Oh yeah.
Or the Radio Shack computer? Like, those were the only computers you could get to back in the 80s.
Right.
And I used to ride my bike to the Radio Shack just to go in, and the operating system was called BASIC. And every line was numbered.
Right.
So the only program that you knew was how to make a word go up and down on the screen. And you wrote everything by line. It was 10, print, Vince, 2, and then 20 was the next line, go to 10. And then you press run, and it would just make the word Vince go up and down the screen. And you go to Radio Shack and do that on every computer in Radio Shack. So it had your name on it. But you think about that, man. I'm still looking at a computer that's got a keyboard on it and a screen just like that computer in 1982 when I used to ride my bike up to Radio Shack. Man, it's like, why are you going to completely abandon a successful model for something? And this goes for the music too. It goes for the music. It goes for what you call jazz music. I could man, argue with the cats about jazz all day, because it's really as simple as the car or the computer or dapping somebody up or whatever. And there's a successful model for something that you can't abandon that and call it that.
Right.
You cannot abandon a computer screen and a keyboard and all the inner workings of it and still call it a computer. You can't abandon a machine with a steering wheel, seats, 4 wheels, something to play some radio music on, and windows, and the car. You can't abandon unless you come up with something equally as effective. And you can't do that with jazz music either. You can't abandon interaction and soul and the blues and the things that make it jazz music and call it jazz.
And definitely language and vocabulary.
Language and vocabulary. When you got 70, 80 years of history saying that this is what it is, You can't just in 2 years say that's not what it is, and just say this is jazz though. This can't work like that. Nothing works like that.
I mean, we call it jazz, it's a name, but because people, how can I say, create different definitions for a name or meaning.
Right.
And when you don't have the narrative, or you don't, let's say, push a narrative, the narrative for the music, ultimately, a lot of it is birthed out of a language, a mutual language between artists and musicians that play in a platform where it's a collective, and it's truly a collective, and they're listening to each other, and they're creating and improvising and composing in real time on a framework. That's the music. And with you talking about arranging, like writing music, like the more people you have on a stage, you have to have more written music just to keep them occupied and
right.
together.
That's right.
Fewer people you have, the less actual written material. Like we go back to Love Supreme, which I was listening to a vintage 2006 recording with Jazz Lincoln Center. I think it was still Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra at that time.
Right.
And the thing that's really unique is that you have people whose concept, like, just because the music is old, every time you play it in a collective is new. And so having people on the same page in large ensembles, as you have fewer people, the music is more organic and natural to those people creating in the same moment in time. And it's funny with the Love Supreme, the arrangement went and wrote for Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra. What's interesting is there's a lot of written music, but then at the same time, there's a lot of space. And some of it's written, it's just a collective for people in a large setting to play, but it's still organic. And the essence of the music is still natural. And I was also speaking a little bit about that to a young musician, about how when music is so spiritual, and I'm kind of going a little bit off a topic, but it's relevant to the global conversation about jazz and what it means, or its essence. The spiritual aspect of music is, you can't capture it in any other format than in the moment, in that place and space and time of when it's happening with those people. So us, as great as technology is, and we can communicate, and you're in Texas and I'm in Michigan, and we're on this call, playing, and the feeling of somebody being next to you and what they present in a human essence, there's a realism and an energy that's tangible.
Right.
You can't equate that, even though we can see each other and all of that, it doesn't go necessarily over those waves. There's something about the connection of people in one place, and the people that are in the room, that bring a certain energy and a life force to what's happening in a moment. So we could listen to records all day, and I'm sure we could, because I wanted to have you speak about your experiences with this, about hearing great musicians live on a bandstand when you were a younger musician, or even as an older musician, and you're like backstage or on the bandstand or near them, or being inside of it on the bandstand, and what that energy feels like. So right. Could you talk about that energy and that life force of?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's absolutely, as you just said, man, it's absolutely necessary, because it can't be approximated in any other setting. You can't approximate that energy of, it's just like being in a room with people that you just talking, or people that you care about and genuinely respect and love, and just being in their presence, being 2 feet away from them, speaking to them over a meal or whatever, watching some whatever, playing some spades or something, whatever you're doing. And that interaction and the energy between people and being in the same space with each other is nothing like that. So especially if you're sharing something like music. Shoot, man, I tell you, I was just this morning, the reason we had to push this back, man, a friend of ours mother turned 83 today, right? And of course, in this age, in the coronavirus, you can't have parties or anything. So we did a drive-by, wave and, happy birthday. And so I took my horn and I was playing happy birthday out the window of the car. And we stopped in front of the house, and man, I got out of the car and played, like a good, 30 feet away from her. Man, it felt like a gig. I actually got out of my horn and played my horn for a person live this morning, playing happy birthday 4 or 5 times. It felt like a gig just to play for somebody. And so it's just the same energy I'm talking about. It's just, you can't approximate it not playing for people with people. And just being, and then when you're around it, to your second point or question, is that when you're around it, just from the side of the stage, like we've been at jazz festivals when other people have been playing. Like I remember the first time I heard something like that it might have been Pori, like in the 90s. And Herbie was on stage with George Coleman, and it wasn't Tony, it might have been Billy Higgins. And somebody else, man, cats from that generation, they're just killing, absolutely killing. And it wasn't like a group that had ever been formed, or toured, or recorded. Or it was just a group they put together of bad cats from that generation. And boy, they were just firing. It was a quartet, George Coleman with these cats. And boy, they were just firing. And I just hadn't been. I'd never been in the presence of cats from that generation playing like that live. I'd heard it on record, a million times. But to actually be there on the wings, 10 feet from where they are on stage, feeling. Maybe it was Mraz. Who was playing bass, man? It might have been George Mraz, or it could have been Peter Betts. It was one of those two, man. I can't remember, man. But whoever it was, man, they were making me feel it. Because I was right there feeling the pulse. I was feeling the interaction, energy between them. There's nothing that can approximate that except for doing that live with people. There's nothing that can approximate playing music with people live. There's nothing that can approximate the feeling of an audience receiving that from people, being given to them live. It's just nothing. There's no way technology can recreate that. They figure out what we were talking about the other day with the problem with latency over the internet signals and being able to play with somebody over the thing on the internet. It might happen at some point. It's not going to be like a live gig. It'll be better than this. Anything will be better than this, but it's not going to be like playing a live gig, because if you can't feel the vibration of the cymbal from being a few feet from it, when you hit the cymbal, man, you can feel as it vibrates, as it sustains and decays. You can feel it, and if you can't feel that in person, then you're not getting a lot of what it is. There's a vibration that comes out of a horn when it plays a note. There's an actual vibration in the air. If you can't feel that vibration, all those vibrations together, and then just the human experience together, man, there's no other way to get that but to do it in person.
Extremely eloquently put.
You've been there. You're the one giving it to cats all the time. What are you talking about?
Man, it's just we're just in a different time. I mean, even pre-COVID-19, pre-coronavirus, the lesson in sound is not. It's not put on the highest order or the most priority of agenda, or the highest order of priority, because sound is the very first thing that's important with the music, or vibration, movement, frequency.
Right.
So rhythm, sound is frequency, period. Yep. Vibration is movement. So sound is movement or rhythm. Like, that's what people understand. So when you have a sound, that's creating rhythms of vibration, which is rhythm.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So the rhythm and vibration in a space, wherever the space is, it could be a 6x10 room, or it could be a massive hall or an open space just out in earth, but it's creating frequency, and it's creating energy. And so that energy being felt when it's created, and the intention that it's created with, is very powerful. It's medicinal. Some people say it's absolutely medicinal. Right. To experience that, and when the energy behind it is of the highest order, and the energy and the intention behind it is pure, and is with love, That's what you're putting into the ethos. It's just love and positive energy. So I hope that we can get back to that, and that humanity can appreciate and rediscover how important that is for the success of humanity, and for the success of you know the earth and where we live, for everything. It's extremely important for all things, and it sounds, it's not even crazy. It's just what it is. If we can celebrate the achievement of being able to share music, I mean, then where are we? Are we just animals like the rest of the kingdom? Like, that's the one thing that we do have and we can create that's different than other animals on the planet, that we actually can create art.
Right. Man, I agree, man, completely. And we have to. There's no way. I mean, people are hungry for it, and people are going to want it. Of course, it's a matter of how much is going to be supported once we come out of this. At some point we're gonna come out of this. At some point there'll be something that will allow people to get together. This isn't this. I don't believe this is like the end of days or nothing like that. So at some point we're gonna get back to some type of closeness to each other and some semblance of what society was like. How much will that desire and that the desire to have art, how much will it translate into actual support?
Right.
That's the question. How much will it translate into a different way of thinking with those who can support it and create platforms to support it? How much is it going to translate into something different and foster them to give more than they used to before this? More support for it because we've been without it for a year or however long this lasts.
Right. Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about? I want to get a couple things. Um, please talk about your favorite album that you produced, that you released as a band leader. Um, do you have one particular, or one that stands out in your mind more than others? Like, share that.
You on it. It's one we did called 3-5.
Man, I was gonna ask. That was my follow up question, because
That's my favorite. That's the favorite record. My favorite record that I've done.
I have a few people that, younger musicians, older musicians, and some people that discovered it, and they were like, one younger musician told me, shared with me, he was like, I looked at the cover and it was just like one of these, covers, Vince's picture, and I was like, yeah, whatever. But when you put the music on, he said the cover's nowhere indicative of what's being played on that record. I found that funny.
It's true. It's true, man. In fact, I remember. Of course, you have no control when you record for labels. You have no control over a lot of things. So we were talking. Me and Niels, the guy who runs Steeplechase, we're talking about this fact. The guy, if you ever see him again, you can see. I'm gonna give you the exact reference for that picture. There's a Sonny Stitt record called "Personal Appearance," and Sonny is looking down at something, looking down just like on that record. Niels, I was talking about that record, and he was saying, "Man, I love that record." He said, "And I want, in fact, let me take a picture of you in that kind of pose." Not saying he was going to use it for the cover, but let me just take a picture of you in that kind of pose, man. How Sonny's looking on this record. So I was okay, man. I'll take the picture. So I did one like that, and then we did a bunch like other things. He used that one for the cover of that record because it references Sonny Stitt's Personal Appearance. That record that Sonny Stitt did for Verve, and because he liked it, I liked it too. Don't get me wrong, but it's out of my control. He puts the records out. But that record though, man, just so much came together because one, I had the right cats. I had the cats that I knew, man. I love and respect everybody on that record. I love playing with everybody on that record, And when you put together the right people with the right intention, you can only make good music. And that's what happened. Man, you, my boy, I've known you for how long we know each other, man. Greg Williams, who I've been playing with since I was at FAMU. We were at FAMU together. 1991, we're freshmen there together in the marching band for a minute. And he was playing trombone in the marching band for a second. I didn't even know he was a bass player at first. And So I've known him since then, and I've always played with him all through college, and he's still my boy, of course. And so, man, Aaron Goldberg, who just I always have loved, and has some of the biggest ears, and is probably he is probably the greatest comper under 50 that I know. If not, he's one of the 5 greatest compers under 50 that I know of. All the hundreds of piano players under 50 I can think of. He, man, just there's a moment on that there that I teach, that I use, and I hate to use my own records for references when I'm teaching.
Should.
I hate to, because I don't want to, I'm not dapping my own stuff up. But there's a moment there where he and y'all in was the opening phrase? It's somewhere in that solo that I played, man. Y'all played the perfect thing to play about 3 times. And I'm like, man, if I would have written the response to what I played when I left some space, it would have been that. And y'all played it. The first time he played something, the second time he played something different, but you heard him play something the first time, and you played something with him in response the second time. That was perfect. It was like I wrote that too. Man, y'all were just killing. I was just and then I had of course my brother Derek, who of course I've been playing with forever, and I love him. I love him dearly and love playing with him. And don't play with him enough. Still to this day, I don't play with him enough. But I was able to get him for that record. And then of course Ice Water, Mark Gross.
Yes, sir.
And that sound that Mark Gross has, and that sound that Derek has, I knew that those 2 sounds were going to do something together. And man, it was just a matter. And I even voiced some of those things so that Gross had the lead over Derek purposely, because I wanted Gross to sound on top, especially on That Dare, I believe. And on Lil B's poem. On those 2, I voiced Gross over Derek because I heard his sound on top of the ensemble. But there are only 3 or 4 soprano players I could call in the world that could have that kind of sound. Maybe 2. I tried him and maybe Victor that actually have that much sound on soprano, or Steve, my homeboy. Oh man, teachers with Kenyatta at Long Island. It's kind of avant-garde.
Sam
Newsom.
Oh, Sam
Newsom, like with that kind of sound, with a sound on soprano, or Branford. Like, okay, it's 4. It's like 4 people I can think that actually have that kind of sound on soprano that would have had enough presence to play over in a voicing, command a voicing over Derek playing in the middle of a voicing, because Derek got a big sound.
He got a huge sound.
So I'm like, there are only a few soprano players that have the sound that would successfully work in that voicing. And so I had Gross on the record, man. And so it worked out, that record, because the right cats were there. And there was no vibe. Everybody's cool because nobody has a vibe. That's why that record came out how it did. And that session was easy. We were playing some hard music.
Man, I was gonna that's what I wanted to bring up about that recording, because even if that wasn't your favorite recording, and it's interesting, and this is for musicians. This comment is for musicians. However, regular people could get it too. When you're doing a job, like, for you're producing a record, you wrote all of the arrangements for the record, is your concept of the record. So you have a lot of stuff going on. But as a player, you're focused in on playing your part and like focusing in on the specifics of you playing your part. So you're sometimes tunnel vision in a sense of like, okay, I have to execute this stuff to make the record work,
Right.
Yeah. As a drummer or percussionist, drummer, conductor, you're a little more aware of the overall shape of the ensemble writing. Like, you have to have a more global view and perspective of like where's the arrangement going, where does it open up, where does it close, where are the breaks, where's the ensemble coming in, right. If there's a soli. Man, I want to tell you, it took me like years after to really appreciate how detailed, because you're doing a record, there's a lot of stuff going on. We had a couple rehearsals or whatever, so you're not so deep into it. But man, the compositions and the songs, for them to be already recorded, you made them uniquely themselves in their own, and the arrangements are absolutely not only challenging but extremely musical. And I just wanted to first acknowledge that, and then also to say, well, what inspired the whole 3-5 record? Like, why? How did you explain to the people what is 3-5? Like, what is the whole concept?
Well, I mean, it's made up of songs in 3 and in 5. And there was just so many, or a combination of the two, so many songs that had elements of that we had just found, over the years, and we play them every once in a while. Dee-wee, stuff like that, man. Um, you know, Boss Hot, which is maybe one of the more played ones in 3. But people, you go to jam sessions, nobody plays anything in 3. Cats don't usually call any kind of tunes in 3, even if you're playing in their bands, and definitely hardly anything in 5, unless it's you or Marcus Roberts or somebody or Winton. So like nobody's playing stuff or Branford, nobody's playing stuff in 5 mostly. Um, at least they weren't for a long time. So man, so for me, I wanted to. There was a collection of songs that were in those 2 meters that I wanted to play, and that were beautiful, that I thought were beautiful, and I just wanted to put them all into one document. First of all, because all of this, they're all splattered in other records. One tune in this record and everything else is in 4, and then one tune in this record and everything else is in 3 or 4 in 4. So I wanted to put them all in one document so you could hear only things that are in these 2 meters for an entire record. And then just try to do something with them, man. And try to do something, in a sextet format. A lot of them weren't originally sextet tunes, so I had an opportunity there in arranging them. And then there were just some things textually, because I knew I was going to have, Mark Gross on the gig. I knew textually there were some things I wanted to do. And I knew I was going to have all of y'all cats with these big ears. So I wanted to make sure to leave enough freedom in there so you all could just do your thing around whatever I created. It was just kind of a mix of all of that. I wanted to do these killing compositions in 3 and 5 and put them in one document. And then I wanted to get some different ensemble voicings on some of the things. And I wanted y'all to do your thing around all of that. So that's what I thought about, man, in putting that together.
Man,
it was hard. It was challenging music, but it was fun. It was fun to do. At least that's how I felt about it. It was a fun session, even though the music was hard.
I recently listened to it with um, a student, and he was very like, bro, what is like, what is this? It sound and the sound of the record sounds like a classic. I didn't even recognize what the record was. I thought it was like original of something else. It has the sound of the ancestors in it. It has the sound of that in it. So that, and like anything, like you say, anytime there's soul in something, I mean, it's just I mean, that's the life force of humanity.
Right. It's going to cut through.
Yeah, I mean, very, very super impressive. I mean, I'm just honored to have been a part of it. So I didn't even know that would be your favorite one, but I still had questions, and I'm playing on it.
I'll tell you, man. There's some moments on there that are just there's some moments that happen on that are they're so uncommon today for those moments to happen because of the way that people play. When I listen back to it and really recognize it, I'm like, damn, did we actually do that? I didn't remember it. I did the same thing with you. It's like I didn't listen to it for a long time, and it was getting radio play every once in a while. I'd hear it on XM or a song, one track from it on XM. I said, man, let me go back and listen to this whole record, because for me, I don't like any of my records, so it takes me a year to actually go back and listen to the record in its entirety. I don't want to hear myself play, but what I did actually, got into the car and just put it on and listened to the whole thing, and picked apart some of these instances, these moments that happened. I was like, well, these cats were just playing, and so for me, man, I started to pick it apart and realize when I was teaching, I was things that should happen. I was like, wait, man, it happened on this record. Let me just play this and point it out. This is what I'm talking about. When you hear something that the soloist does and then they leave space for a reaction or for an interaction, this is the way that you should approach it. Now, it's not the only way, but this is one of the ways that you can approach it. Check this out. And I did like, a bunch of instances on that record, man, where you and Aaron and Greg, man, just hooked up into some things in the perfect spot, the perfect thing at the perfect spot.
Well, it also requires space, so it goes both ways. So sometimes people, soloists or horn players more specifically, they get in their own way. Like sometimes,
That's true. That's true.
Sometimes like leaving space is super powerful because the music breathes and you allow them into the conversation on your journey and your voyage to infuse something else, like whatever, or help shape it for you. So it makes your work just like have to work. Miles obviously is one of the masters at that. Right. Prez, or
Sure.
like people,
Right.
people that leave space around the story. You don't have to tell everything.
No, you don't. But you're not telling it by yourself either. That's the thing. Right. Everybody has something to say. You might be leading the storytelling, but you're not telling it by yourself. Somebody else has to say something in there too. They might not agree. They can say that.
Absolutely. Can you give me your viewpoints on the state of the music scene in New York City today? I know you're not there, but you were there for many years, and not just New York City, but anywhere. It could be Houston. It could be just a global outlook on it. And also, we could just start with that. What is your viewpoint on the music scene uh, today? Pre-COVID, maybe.
Pre-COVID, right? Well, I think the music scene, the overall music scene, not jazz scene.
For jazz and music. I mean, you could start specifically with jazz, and then you could branch it out to music in general.
Well, I mean, it's well, shoot, it's going to be kind of the same. I think that as you well know, I think that people are perpetuating things that of the least substance. I think that it goes in every direction, vocalists, instrumentalists, compositionally. I think the things that are being perpetuated are the things that have the least substance in them, but they are the easiest to mass produce and to market to a number of people with different levels of understanding. So that's why they do it. That's why the industry does it. Within all of that, they're completely screwing over artists who create any of that music, whether it be jazz or anything, making sure they make the least amount of money, have really only participate in actions that serve the label or the entity that put them out, that produced them, and not serve them to have any kind of longevity, and that don't help to elevate the artist at all and make them a better artist doing whatever it is that they do. I think that's a general statement of what's going on in music, period. I mean, my wife is a vocalist, so I've listened to a lot more vocalists lately in the non-jazz arena. Watch things like The Voice, shows like that, and listen to how people are singing out here, pop songs. And boy, people are just out there hollering with no kind of nuance and no knowledge of what notes that they're singing, or no knowledge that there are other options in phrasing, and no technique, and and these are the people that people are clapping for and going crazy over. And man, I've been having heard vocalists with technique and with an understanding of phrasing. I haven't heard Barry Carter, I haven't heard people like that, like people that actually can sing, and of every genre. I haven't heard Aretha Franklin live. Like, haven't heard people that are on the highest levels of things. It's sad to see in the industry perpetuating these people that have very little talent or understanding of it, and then not helping them to become better by having people that are teaching them have no knowledge of it. So it's just that, but more kind of ignorant artists that you put in front of people it creates other further generations of ignorant artists behind them, and it's easy to exploit them. So you always have a pipeline of ignorant artists coming through. So when this one that's on The Voice now falls out of favor, there's another one in that same neighborhood that's hollering and screaming at home right now that you can go get and have them in the next Voice next summer. And same thing for every kind of, everything going on in music. Like this, there's very little substance being taught, perpetuated in any music out here anywhere by the music establishments out here. And so it still falls upon those artists that do have substance and that do value knowledge and training and making good music in whatever genre. And I'm going to consider myself one of them. We're in the minority. As you already know, we've been in the minority for a long time, but we're still out here. It's up to continue to give the world music of substance and to teach people things of substance pertaining to music, because people will always be gravitated towards it. And it's just a matter of getting the right people gravitated towards it. But I think that they always will. Like substance doesn't go away. It's just like that soul we were talking about. People are going to always go towards that. So it's just a matter of doing that in response to what's being perpetuated out here. But what's being perpetuated is what has been perpetuated for a very long time. You can look at it in every genre of music. Listen to hip hop today, and I love hip hop. I'm a hip hop cat, actually. We talked about this too. Like we came up with when it first started. Both you and I came up, just like after rappers died and all of that. So we came up with it when it was being formed, before it crossed over. We came up with it before it crossed over, Right. So, I mean, just knowing, man, the substance that used to be in 16 bars of anybody spitting on a hip hop record, and now what you hear in 16 bars of somebody spitting on a hip hop record, it's like, that's like a microcosm of what's going on in all music. You can just pick it out, and the same thing in what's going on in what they call jazz music. A lot of the same thing. The only thing.
What's our phrase? Ranked right up there at the bottom.
Right up there at the bottom, baby. But it's the truth. And the only thing is that I would say that in jazz music that there is at least an environment of scholarship that exists, because there are first of all, there are a number of programs, college programs, studying programs. Now, they're not all of substance. I'm not going to say them generalized. They're not all of substance, but there are a few that are okay, that are teaching some good things. They're not in the majority either, though. Most of them are not. But at least that exists more so than it exists for any other genre of music. Like aside from Berkeley, where are you going to go and study R&B? Out of all the universities in the world, they got a monopoly on that right now. There's really no other program in the world that's like that. Now I'm not even going to talk about what they're studying when they study R&B, but just the fact that you can do it is just something. But there's no traditional scholarship in any other genre of music anywhere, and so that allows for artists that don't really have much substance to come out.
I was going to ask you too. What are the economics around it? Because I'm always thinking about this, and this is a conversation we've had in the past, and our contemporaries we've had about how does a musician make a living in the state that we're in now? Let's say you went to school, you in four-year program, you're actually one of the top in your class and can play. How do you get a job?
You have to create it at this point. You create your own. I mean, we were fortunate to work for one of the only entities that can hire musicians, to play on a full-time basis. But I mean, how many of them are there? I'm in the process of trying to create one now in Houston, and I haven't created it yet. I'm trying. I'm still working on it. So I mean, how many are there? So I mean, as far as for an independent artist who's not looking to join an organization like that, you have to become the organization and create the opportunities yourself, and then normalize it with your business practices yourself, as if you are the corporation. And you have to find a way to build up your fan base, build up your distribution, build up your social media presence, build up all of that, build up a way to perform live, build up go get, if grants are part of what you're looking for, go and apply for grants, or find your income stream and the stream that supports your art. You have to go and find all of that. Whereas, an organization like Jazz and Lincoln Center has a team of people that do it. You have to do the same thing that they're doing. It's a great model for what to do. They just have the people to do it. It's a matter of you as one person. You got to find a way to do a little bit of everything that they do, or any organization that has built that kind of platform, SF Jazz or whoever else you might think of. You got to find a way to do a little bit of all of those different things, activities, to propel yourself, just like they've done all of those things to propel the organizations. So that's part of what has to be done post your study. And you should be studying that, actually. You should be studying how to do that in your studies. Or I should say the schools should be teaching you how to do that. So you're ready to do that when you come out. But that's another story. We'll be a long time dealing with that, boy. With some school and all of that.
What's your perspective on government and politics in reference to art?
Well, I believe that the government, I believe that any government should value their artists. And I think that, this is a capitalist society. I think that the dollars that they put behind the arts tell you how much they value their artists. I was reading something about Germany passing a $40-50 billion arts subsidy package for doing coronavirus, something $40-50 billion for artists only in Germany. And that was a month ago. When I saw that, just by just like, man, Germany has like a third of the people that the United States has, maybe the third of the budget, and they put 40-50 million. So that means that we should be putting, 1.5 billion towards the artists or so, $1 billion towards artists only, earmarked for artists somehow. What faction of the United States government is going to do that? So our government doesn't value the arts like that. They should. And it's just a matter of, you have to go to individual Congress people, and you have to speak to them and try to get them to make ways for you within the governmental means, because you can't do it yourself. You have to have them. They're the gatekeepers to all of that. So you have to go to them and get them to do it. And it's especially with what we have in office now, it's a hard road right now, but it's not impossible. It's just a hard road, harder than it's ever been right now.
Vincent, I don't want to take up any more of your time. It's been amazing to hear your perspectives, to hear your voice, to hear you just sharing a little bit about your world and your journey. I would like, I wish you have your horn with you, do you?
Yeah, I got this over there. Just put it in a case. You give me a second, I'll get it. Hold on. Yeah, I'm here.
I'm not even gonna ask you to play a lot. Just maybe play something original to Vincent Gardner. Just like a little, 3 seconds.
Man, shoot. I'll play one of my favorite songs. I'm gonna write something like that one day.
Bro, that's the spirit wrote that on you and Shedrick.
That's praised by Ali Jackson.
Oh man, it didn't mean nothing. Y'all praised it. Y'all praised it on up high. Man, it's always a pleasure. I hope everyone enjoyed spending this moment with Vincent, and we hope to see you all soon. Love and blessings always. Keep the music up high.